that's the thing that's really interesting about real estate is that you can't really be like, oh yeah, this is like my bread and butter. I'm going to do it for the next 30 years. Like you really have to shift with the market and with the demand and just like constantly change like what you're working on,
There is no rest for the wicked.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the 10X for Gen XYZ podcast. I'm Zach Winter.
And I am Mark Adair Rios.
And our guest today is Karin Chao. Karin is a managing director at Infinity Realty Advisors, a commercial real estate investment advisory firm based in downtown Los Angeles. And over the last 5 years, she's sponsored dozens of multifamily units across LA. Her firm also offers commercial and residential brokerage services, asset management, and property management. And Karin's also the president of the Los Angeles chapter of Lambda Alpha International, a land economics society. I'm also a member of Lambda Alpha, and that's where we first met. Karin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Hi, Karin.
Hi.
So I'd love it if we could maybe start by chatting about your career background. You've got a degree in culinary arts and you're a certified yoga instructor. Super interesting background.
You sound like me.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your path and how you ultimately arrived at real estate.
Sure. I mean, I also have a degree from NYU Business School too, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, my career actually started off in finance, pretty traditional trajectory. Once I graduated from NYU, I worked in trading for several years. And I think this would have been back in the early 2000s. And, honestly, I think the culture in finance, especially trading, back then just really wasn't a great fit for someone like me. And so after I would say I was like probably about 28 years old when I decided that I just wanted to get out of it. I'd saved up some money and I knew that I wanted to leave New York. I'm originally from LA. So I left New York and I ended up in Thailand and I lived there for a while. And while I was there, I didn't really know what I wanted to do initially. I knew that I wanted to stay there as long as I possibly could. So I found this commune that was down in the Southern Islands. I know this sounds like the beach, right? The movie, the beach or the book, right? So I found this commune where it was very inexpensive to live there, almost nothing. And we had to do all kinds of chores to like keep up the property, everything from, cleaning the trails every morning to like wiping up the gecko poop, that would like land on the porches and the decks. And while I was there, I met a group of yoga instructors and we just started practicing together and meditating. And it just was something that I think I had been craving ever since I left college and was working in that very corporate culture. And honestly, it was a very toxic corporate culture of just like a lot of like, I want to say like the early 2000s was like a frat boy culture in the United States, right?
Was it kind of like a Wolf of Wall Street hardcore?
Yeah,
you're there trading every day.
Yeah, it was like when Howard Stern was looked up to. And so it was just like not the right fit for a young woman, right? And so I left and started doing this like yoga meditation. Eventually I got certified and became a yoga instructor. I taught for a while I was in Thailand, mostly to tourists who were on vacation. And then I decided I wanted to come back to LA. When I came back here, I actually did teach yoga in Venice for a couple of years. And it just, I knew I was able to offer more than that and I wanted to do more. And as much as I love that practice, it was just like not something I wanted to commit a full career to. So I taught on the side and I got a job at Barclays that had a special situations trading desk, right? And at the time I actually didn't even want to become a trader anymore. I wanted something really chill and low key. So I applied for the receptionist job, right? And that way I did. I applied for the receptionist job and I taught yoga in the evenings and on the weekends. But well, this part of the story is a little sad. So 3 months after 3 months after working at Barclays, I actually was diagnosed with cancer. And I knew that, this is before Obamacare. So back then you can't get insured if you had a pre-existing condition, right? And so I was like, oh shit, there's no way that I'm going to be able to cover my own insurance, right, to pay for my treatment. And so I talked to the MD there, and I was just like, hey, just so you know, I'm actually a trader also, right? Like, and I think he knew that what my background was. And I was like, you probably need a backup trader. You guys only have one guy right now. And, I'm willing to put in extra hours to cover his desk when he's out. And, I'll negotiate a pay that I think is reasonable. That I know you guys weren't thinking of adding a second trader onto your P&L this year, but like, I'm reasonable, right? And they hired me full time on the spot because I wasn't a full time receptionist and I didn't have insurance. So I negotiated that, became a trader, had to kind of quit my yoga career while I was going through my cancer treatment. And it was a hard time. And to be honest, I got really, really depressed while I was, back at my trading hours, except now in LA. So I had to go in at like 6 in the morning, right? And I really hated it because I was chemo at the same time and you're exhausted and just drained. And one of the things I always loved was cooking, right? That was my passion. And back then I lived in downtown LA and my commute was all the way out to Santa Monica. And, for those of you who know, it's like during rush hour, it's a pretty bad commute, right? So I actually started going to culinary school at night, right? So I would go to work, take a break, go and do my chemo, come back to work, finish out the day, and then drive over to there was a culinary school that I went to that was out in Mar Vista. And it just
way to reduce your stress.
Yeah, no, but it really, really just like fed my soul. Again, I met so many cool people. I met these like really amazing women who started their own catering company. Just I really loved it. And it just felt like at the end of the day, I had this family that I would go to and like cook a large meal and we'd have dinner together at 10 o'clock at night. And I loved it. It was great. And after I finished my cancer treatment, I've been in recovery now. I'm not recovery, sorry. They call it remission, which I always think is like the weirdest. It sounds so bad, right? Remission, right? So I've been in remission for over 10 years now.
Fantastic.
So after I finished, I got a culinary degree out of it also. I moved on to working at Capital Group in portfolio management. And I was there for a couple of years, like maybe 3 years, I think. And again, it's like, I just felt like I had this calling to do a lot more than what the job was offering me. And I think this is the case in so many, what we consider prestigious, like respectable corporate jobs. It's the case where, your role is very limited to like a specialty, right? It's like, you can't be like, oh, well, I also have like an interest in this other department. Can I dabble in that? Like they usually don't let you do that. And so around that time, I started having a lot of just conversations with my father, my father also has like a really interesting backstory, maybe more interesting than mine, but he had been in commercial real estate for about 40 years at that point. And so we started talking and he was like, well, why don't you just quit and come work with me? And, I'll show you the ropes. You're going to learn things really quick. And, long story short, that's sort of what I did. I worked for him for a couple of years, got like a super crash course in real estate. And luckily, because I had a finance background, I picked things up pretty quickly. But I think after a couple of years for him, I realized that I just like developed really bad imposter syndrome, where I just thought I was like undeserving of any of the successes I had had, because everyone would just think that, oh, well, yeah, like it's like you get an allowance money from your dad and then you kind of just show up to things, right? You know, and I really, really suffered from it so bad. And so after 2 years of working for him, I just took myself off of payroll and I decided that I wanted to start some of my own projects. So around that time, my partner and I, like all we could afford with our life savings was like a really crappy house that was in Westchester. And we bought it and we're like, well, we're going to try to, we were able to build by right. And at that time, I actually was already a Lambda Alpha member, which kind of like brings us full circle. And I met so many developers and so many just really interesting people that I was constantly able to get free advice from. And in fact, some of our members became some of my investors as well in my very early projects. And my partner and I, part of it was just doing really great due diligence and part of it was timing. But we ended up buying up several lots in the Westchester area right before they announced the SoFi Stadium. And so, the value of our property went up tremendously. Yeah. And so that's sort of like, it brought me to where I am today. This is like extremely long story long now.
Yeah. That's great, man. There's so many things. What's really interesting is a lot of people that I know, and maybe I might include myself into this as well. I don't want to say you fall upwards, but it's really easy. It seems really easy because of your training and your background. It seems like you could always fall into these roles that, at least now from my real estate perspective, seem like part of the pinnacle, right? Being able to get into these great jobs that are high paying, really high kind of level. And it seems like and I could be wrong, and it's probably a struggle, but it seems like that part seemed easy. It was trying to 10x your life in other areas that seemed like you were trying to find ways to do that, right?
I guess so. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but I think you might be right.
Some people make money like that. Some people can just fall into gigs, high paying jobs, make money, not a problem. And then, their real kind of thing that they're trying to work out is how do I exponentially grow my health right now? Because I feel bad, or things like that. Right. I don't know. It's interesting.
It is really interesting. Yeah. I will say that for a lot of people, like maybe in the beginning of their career, you're more focused on things like, oh, I want to get a raise, I want to make more money, or I want to get a promotion because that's like the most obvious like milestone of like success or accomplishment, right? But I think that as you get older and if you have the opportunity to like really, really think about it, right? Oftentimes, like once you check off those boxes, get that promotion, like you're not necessarily that happy, right? It's like you're just waiting for the next promotion and the next raise. And so I think for people, as you get older and as you mature and maybe go through some challenges in your personal life, you learn that it's really more about just like knowing what it is. Like if money was no option, right? Like I always ask myself, like, oh, if I won the, $500 million jackpot tomorrow, what would I do with my life, right? Like, I mean, if I didn't have to earn money, like what are my passions? And then I kind of work towards that in my life, right? So I know, it's like cooking. I'm working on a cookbook right now, actually.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
But you never wanted to go into the restaurant business. You did the culinary school.
I did, and I was stopped. I was stopped by my father, right? So this is why I say my father has a very interesting origin story. So he came to America, like didn't have any money, like a very typical Chinese immigrant story where he was a busboy at a restaurant, then he like became the dishwasher, right? And worked his way up. And then eventually he bought the restaurant that he worked at as the dishwasher originally, right? And then that's how he got into commercial real estate. Anyway, so when I graduated from culinary school and said, I really like this, and I think I'm good at this, right? I think it's something that I'm quite good at. He was like, I didn't bust my ass for like 30 years, so you could end up working in a kitchen again. He was like, hell no. Yeah.
It's
But,
a hard business though, isn't it?
It's a very hard business. I mean, especially now, the margins are so thin and operating costs are so high. The cost of labor is high. Like, I mean, I think if anything, the pandemic just showed that, everyone was operating on threadbare margins, it's a really hard business.
Yeah. Especially, and if you're making a name for yourself, or you're trying to get that business out there, I always think back to the late, great Anthony Bourdain and his experiences in the kitchen, and just how absolutely rough and tough it is to be a chef.
Oh, yeah.
To be in the kitchen. Doesn't matter what your training is. When you're in the kitchen, there's a kind of a set level, right? And you guys are all in there.
It's like being it's like being in the military. It's like everyone has their part. You have to do your part. You don't fall out of line, and everyone relies on each other for it to operate, because it's a very tight and potentially dangerous environment that you're in. Yeah. So, I mean,
the hours are also just brutal. I mean, you listen to some of these celebrity chefs and the number of hours they had to put in when they were making it, or just nonstop, hardly getting any sleep.
Totally.
It is. I think people who work in the restaurant business, you end up having a very difficult time socializing with people outside of the restaurant business because of your hours, right? You work these insane hours. Oftentimes you end up developing some kind of, alcohol or maybe drug dependency because of the odd hours, and you're exhausted. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I find fascinating about your journey or your path, Karin, is you kind of went through like a midlife crisis really early on in your career. You identified, because everybody, you go to college, there's an expectation that you're going to become, successful in some profession. And you don't really realize whether you enjoy it or not until you actually start doing it. But what I think is great about you is you had the courage to say, I'm in this profession, but I don't really like it. And you ventured off and pursued something else and found a different path.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I described it like it was a lot easier than it worked out, right? I mean, there was definitely a lot of, where I questioned myself, like, what are you doing? Like, you have security on this side, like you make good money and you have all this stuff, right? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you throwing it all away? And, I made it sound like it was a much easier decision than it actually was in real life. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting, just not to kind of bring myself into all of that, but I actually was kind of opposite, right? I dropped out of college to get into the entertainment industry very young, because I found my passion, luckily, right at that time, and spent a long time in the business. And what's very interesting is I saw a lot of people over my 30 some odd years, I saw a lot of people kind of taking your path, right? They went to college, they got great jobs out of college, expectations of their parents, did the whole thing, and then just said, I'm out of here. I want to become an actor. And these people would show up in the theater that I was working out of, and watching them kind of go through and figure it all out for themselves was pretty incredible. Whereas me, the love-hate relationship I have for the actual business, kind of opened doors for me to really explore the business side of things that I felt like I missed out on in the previous years. It's really strange. It's really interesting,
Out of curiosity, what type of career did you want to pursue in the entertainment industry?
I'm an actor, so
you are? Okay. Yeah.
So film and TV, theater.
Oh,
I
that's
fell in love with
great.
the theater, but and I'm a working actor, so I was able to
Okay.
luckily be able to kind of make my way, and so yeah,
Yeah, it's a hard industry to be in. I think, like, I don't think people give actors enough credit for the amount of footwork that's put into getting a job,
yeah,
Um, yeah,
it's
it's a lot of work.
I would
Yeah.
say that the things that I took away from all that whole experience were, number one, I realized I was an entrepreneur just very naturally
Hmm.
because you have to be. You're running your
Yeah.
own business from the very get-go, and there's nobody out there to help you. There's no help,
No.
right? And just really the even though there's kind of an artistry involved in a lot of the personalities, there's a quiet tenacity in a lot of people that I know that are in the business, that
Mm.
somehow you're able to just really kind of turn off whatever rejection and all of that stuff, and just know that it's consistency that kind of wins the day, staying in there.
Yeah.
And literally, I say this all the time, literally looking around after years and seeing, oh, those guys aren't here anymore and I'm still here, and oh yeah,
Yeah.
the jobs are coming my way now.
Totally.
Really weird. And I hate to say that, because eventually there's people that are still acting where I'm not as active anymore. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm the guy that might have fallen off, but thank goodness it was 30 years later and not 4 years later. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. How did you how did you transition from acting into real estate?
Real estate for me was a passion, and
Uh-huh.
it was also a way for me to stay out of the bars and restaurants. So I never had to do a waiting job and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And
Uh-huh.
so, nowadays, pretty much every actor, every realtor you see is an actor. And pre-crash, early 2000s, I was kind of
Uh-huh.
on that tip. I got into the loan space. I had my brother was a mortgage broker, so
Okay.
it was pretty easy, and I understood it. I had a kind of a facility to understand how real estate worked, and really liked
Yeah.
it. And I'm a transactional guy, so I like the thing, and
Yeah.
so I did that, and then I was also investing and buying land and flipping houses and wholesaling, just the whole bit.
Yeah.
For me, like,
Yeah.
not to talk, I don't want to,
No,
but,
I'm
but,
very curious. Yeah.
but
Please.
like the kind of bottom set that I kind of start off with is really about what can I do? What can I find that really has almost an infinite pathways to learn.
Hmm.
And so I practiced jujitsu, not now because of COVID, but previously I practiced jujitsu, and it's an art
Uh-huh.
form where it's infinite in how you can express yourself, and that martial art it goes everywhere. Same thing with acting,
Yeah.
because you're always learning
Yeah.
about yourself and developing. The same thing with real estate. Like there's really so many pathways that you can learn about. You'll never ever ever know everything, right?
Hmm.
And even
Hmm.
when you think you know everything, you'll get walloped. And so
Yeah.
it's that's what I love about it. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
That I don't ever have to stop if I don't want to.
Well, it's
Yeah.
also
There.
an incredibly entrepreneurial business, right? And I think all of us have an entrepreneurial spirit, and real estate really helps us facilitate that. And there's so many, as you're saying, Mark, there's so many different areas we could delve into
Yep.
and pursue in real estate. It's really a great area.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
And
Yeah.
are you doing primarily you're working through your single family houses on the Westchester, or are you doing multifamily, or have you
Oh, no.
expanded?
So that would have been about, so we started doing that probably around 2015, 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and we've sold most of them. So we had several of them along La Cienega Boulevard. Like if you go down, you'll see a cluster of them
Yep.
on your way down to the airport. La Tierra. And they all used to be single family houses. We just found out that they were all actually zoned for multifamily. So we were able to build by right. So over, I would say between 2015 through probably 17, we acquired most of those lots
Mm-hmm.
and built on them, leased them out for a while, and then I would say probably in 2019, we sold the very last one. So we've
Right.
sold all of those. And then we started moving into the mid-city area. We're still building by right. I have a couple properties there that we're currently still under construction. And then we also have a couple properties in like the, do you know where the Hollywood Dell area is? So it's very interesting. It's I didn't know about it for the longest time, and I actually lived pretty close to it. So there's this tiny little pocket of like single family homes that are just beautiful, and it's charming. The homes were mostly built in the 20s and the 30s. And I think it was originally built, when it was originally built, mostly it was like studio, like screenwriters and actors lived there. And it's just like right off of Hollywood Boulevard, which is like weird because it's such a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
But there's this charming tiny area where it's just like full of beautiful homes, and it's quiet and it's clean. We found like a really old property there that was kind of, it just looked like it was like, it really either needed to be restored by someone who loves restoring homes, or it just needed to be something different. So we bought it, ended up tearing it down, and we're building a single family house in the front, and then we're building a triplex in the back.
Fantastic.
So we thought it'd be great for someone who's like, hey, I want to like buy a home to live in, but also have investment income. So that's something that we're also working on now.
That's cool.
Is it, what's the zoning on that for single family and then 3 in the back?
Oh, God, I have to talk to my partner about it. I'll tell you, I'll look it up and I'll tell you. Like we acquired it actually back in, we started looking at it back in 2018. And so it sucks because like the pandemic really slowed down everything. And it's just been like, it's been such a huge delay in everything that we've been trying to do. And to be honest, so Mark, you're asking me if like I'm still working on these. Like I think once we complete these, we might have to leave LA to like look at other properties, because I think just in the last, how long has it been now? Like 6-7 years I've been doing this. Our construction costs have gone up by almost 50%.
Yeah.
And then like just even land is like, it's so hard to come by. We're just competing with so many people now. And I'm thinking that we'll probably have to like pivot and start looking at either different types of properties to get into, maybe doing less ground up development and more value add type of properties. So it's weird how, it's like, I think that's the thing that's really interesting about real estate is that you can't really be like, oh yeah, this is like my bread and butter. I'm going to do it for the next 30 years. Like you really have to shift with the market and the demand and just like constantly change like what you're working on.
There is no rest for the wicked.
Well, Mark and I are going through the same transition right now because we've been doing value add multifamily, but over the last 3-4 years, that space has gotten so competitive and prices.
Even outside of LA, because I know you guys did a lot of stuff in the Midwest, right? Or
so
even outside of the Midwest,
even in tertiary markets in the Midwest, cap rates are so compressed, it's crazy. It's just so overly frothy. So
it's a perfect storm, right? It's a perfect storm, and this probably from your research, but we have a housing crisis, we have an affordability crisis. People in this new gig economy, W-2 jobs aren't as plentiful as most bankers would like. And so a lot of people, younger people, aren't able to purchase houses.
Oh yeah.
They're 1099 or they're scrabbling together some sort of gig, income or whatever. They're like, how do I prove my income? I can't buy a house.
Oh my gosh.
And so they're renting.
Yeah.
And so the competition for getting affordable
rentals,
housing, and then accelerated with COVID, where people were just rushing to rentals outside of the cities, finding places to lock in, nice places.
Yeah.
Well, for multifamily syndicators, it's a boon, especially with low interest rates. Forget it, it's very, very competitive, and you're seeing Greensboro, North Carolina, right?
Well, and then the issue becomes you've got these value adds and you turn these units, you upgrade the units and you've increased the prices, and then you try to sell it based off of another value add, positioning. How far can you keep pushing that envelope and continually upgrading units and pushing rents? You've got these tenants, like in LA, the tenants are paying probably 50% plus of their income is going towards rent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that changing.
No.
I think, and part of it's a little bit of the landlord's fault, but I also think it's just the situation that until we really get on building much more housing and figuring out how to get people into single family houses.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like there needs to be a way where we can distribute talent, jobs, wealth across the country, right? Because I think what really is hurting us is this: everyone feels like they need to be in a coastal city to be able to make good money, work for a good, like a good company, right? And then you just have all of these people who are like, working for tech companies that are coming to LA to be like, oh, $2 million for a house, sure, And then you're just like, meanwhile, you're just like, well, there's a lot of people who live in LA who are just school teachers who aren't making that kind of money.
Totally.
So where are they supposed to live, right?
Right.
But it's crazy. I wish there was a way where we could figure out how to distribute jobs and wealth and talent and just everything across the country, because there's so many small cities across the US that desperately need this kind of revitalization.
Mm-hmm.
But it just feels like everyone is like, fighting tooth and nail to be in LA, New York, maybe San Francisco. We'll see, right? I'm not really sure if everyone's like fighting tooth and nail to go back there. I feel like a lot of people are kind of like, let me figure out how to like work from Lake Tahoe instead of San Francisco.
Well,
there's a big migration out of San Francisco right now just because of all of the things going on there, right?
Yeah.
Crime,
Yeah.
et cetera. And
but you bring up a really good point in terms of, like the thought that I had, and it was just from a very basic kind of infrastructure level, and not just, pipes and roads and things like that, but employment, jobs, manufacturing, stuff like that, putting employment, like viable employment, that's not just one factory out, outside of Salt Lake City or somewhere, some warehouse somewhere, like in a real economy. It's difficult, and that's part of it, right? People go where the jobs are.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a coastal city, even if it is in a smile state, people are migrating to the smile states. Aside from Boise, Idaho, people are going up there too. But it's where the jobs are, and the weather. I think that's that's a big thing.
Yeah, sure. It is weather too.
Like if you're going to be out of a job and it's cold, it's like, forget it. I'm going down south. At least I'm going to be warm.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely, it's weird. So my husband and I, we have a lot of conversations about like just the future of this country and like, where is the economy going? Not like in the next few years, but like 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. Like if we had kids, like what are things that we could do to prepare our kids to have a good life, right? Because I think starting from my generation, I feel like things have become like exponentially more difficult for people to like have a house, to have, just like very common things that we thought as American citizens that you would just have as an adult: housing, education, healthcare. These are like more and more becoming very, very difficult for your average citizen, right? And then when you talk about people who kind of fall under middle class, like working class, like I don't even know how people get by, right, in major cities. And it's really interesting because the thing is, it's not that we don't have talent. It's not that we don't have entrepreneurs. We don't have people starting businesses, people who are educated. We have all of those things. But there's a part of me that feels like an overabundance of like government regulations are like actually really small businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really making it much more risky for anyone to decide to become an entrepreneur or a business owner because of like lawsuits, because of permits, because of whatever, you know. But it was like one thing that just like made me kind of sad because I was thinking about when my parents first came to this country and how they didn't know any, like they didn't even speak English, right? They didn't know anything. They had like a small savings, right? And the fact that someone like them, they were able to be so successful to like run a restaurant, like, so, and I think because back then there was like way less like lawsuits, health codes, this and that you have to jump through hoops through, right? It was just kind of like, oh, do you sell a product? Yes. Okay, well, how much does it cost? Here you go. And as long as your gross revenue was like higher than your operating, you know, expenses, like you made some money, right? But I feel like now it's, you know, for me, I'm, you know, educated in America. I know how to read legal documents. Like I understand a lot of things, but there's this like, I just feel like it's such a huge risk to like take on any kind of like small business these days. It's just, you're like, oh, you know, I don't know if that's going to work out. Yeah.
But as a counterpoint, I'll just say that, you know, it's never been easier to start a business.
It's true.
To
It's
get
true.
started in America, in
Yeah.
this country. I mean, it's
You're right.
really, really
Just
easy
like,
to get started and start making money
it's weird, right?
in a lot
Because
of
it's
like,
like,
yeah.
I
So
think it's almost like because you have so much information in front of you that you can have free access to, it makes it a lot easier to start a business, but it also makes it so that you are so that you're aware of all the risk involved as well. Whereas I feel like when my parents did it, they weren't really aware of all the risks, and they're just like, oh yeah, let's give it a try, you know.
yeah,
And it worked out for them.
yeah.
Well, I do agree, though, that the government has gotten so much bigger than when your parents were first starting out in their business, and the regulatory environment, you know, like I heard Elon Musk say this, that the thing about regulations and laws is that every year our legislators are passing more laws, but they don't kill any laws. So every year the number of laws
Right.
and regulations
It's
just
like
grows and grows.
extra.
Nothing
Yeah.
sunsets and expires.
That's
So-
great.
Yeah. And actually, Zach, I think that these like just like compliance laws, all this stuff, I actually think it's like one of the main reasons why healthcare is completely unaffordable nowadays in America. It's just like hospitals are like working so hard sure they're not going to get sued by someone rather than focusing on, you know, providing healthcare.
Right.
So, you know, it's really interesting. And the reason why I bring this up is because over last weekend, my husband and I, we went out to Palm Springs, and there used to be this like really, really cute little tiny resort, right? Really small. And it was run by the owners ran it themselves, and they actually lived at the resort. And it was so charming because it just felt like this like 1950s, like, you know, like roadside motel, you know. And we used to really love going there. And then a couple of years ago, we found out that they're putting it up for sale. And I was like, oh, I wonder why. This place is so charming. I love it so much, right? So I actually went and talked to their broker, and I was like, oh, like, you know, I just like, I'm curious about the property, right? So I looked to see how much it was selling for. I asked for their financials, and I found out that they were not making a profit at all doing what they did. Right? Like they had renovated it and made it so nice that they couldn't get the rates to like cover their expenses. Right. And it was like heartbreaking for me. So anyway, the pandemic happened. And then last weekend, we decided to go to Palm Springs. And I was like, hey, let's drive by there to see what's there now. Cause we knew that it had sold. Right. And I drove by, and then I found out that the people who bought it turned it into like a rehab facility.
Oh,
and I was so bummed out. But then I was like using my real estate mind. I was like, well, that's the only way that a property like that would be profitable to
Highest
anyone
and
who wants
best
to buy
use.
it.
Best and best
Right.
use.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, you mean like junkies get to go and use it and I can't?
Well, you know, yeah. It's so funny. I was gonna say, why didn't you buy it? But like, you know,
But it's not profitable as like whatever, you know, the hotel model that they had, like
Right.
the business model as a motel, it was not profitable. you know? And so I was just so sad and so bummed out. I was like, man, yeah.
And that brings up a really good point. Yeah, I mean, we can never know the people behind these businesses. We can never know what their mindset is either, right? Like
Sure.
they did all this stuff they want, but we really don't know also. And I think it's a big factor how they're running it.
Yeah.
I mean, like all of
Right.
that stuff too. They could have driven it into the ground, even
It's
though
true.
it seemed like
Themselves,
it's amazing.
right? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other thing I was just going to say, and I don't know much about this because I feel like I'm getting left behind too. And I, at one point, felt like I was really on the leading edge on a lot of things, right?
Mhm.
But things are moving so fast, and people are able to find their way in things that are even outside of our scope. And it may be that there needs to be just a real change in thinking, innovative thinking for all of us as individuals, as a tribe, as a nation, as whatever, in terms of maybe recognizing that the old modes of existing and making money and work and all that stuff, they're starting to go by the wayside, right? And I don't know, I'm thinking a lot about these people that are making money in NFTs, right? Artists who generally were among the poorest people, however noble it might be, among the poorest people ever, right? And they're so talented, and really pursuing their passions, but not really finding a industry like I found to be able to make money through.
Yeah.
Now they're making money. They don't even need a benefactor anymore, like to try to find somebody to, buy their pictures or they can commission. They can go out and sell these NFTs and make money, like real money. And they're now making, like, things have shifted, and it's really like, I can't for the life of me even understand how it all works. And like,
Me neither.
they can.
I want to meet someone who purchased one of these because I still don't totally understand what it means to own an NFT. So you purchase a piece of artwork, but how is it displayed? How do you see it? Are you only able to see it over your computer screen? I just don't. I wish I could meet someone who's purchased one, because I was like, I don't totally understand this.
So I was on Twitter one time, and I was reading this thread, and this poor guy got his NFT. I guess something happened where OpenSea sold it out from under him, and he had spent some money, and it was an avatar, and it was a great looking, one of those, I don't know if it was one of those ape, avatars or whatever, the cartoons. And oh my God, this is capitalism right here. So he's going back and forth. He's complaining that, OpenSea and this and that. And somebody comes in and says, well, you don't really own it anymore, so you really need to change your avatar. And the whole feed just went silent. Like, you could hear the whole Twitter feed just go, oh.
I so don't understand it. I mean, and I'm not much of an art collector myself, but I understand what it means to be a traditional art collector, right? It's you own something that some person made one of, and then will contact you to ask if you'll display and have an exhibit in their museum. But I don't understand NFTs. I really don't, because I don't understand how you enjoy it. How do you see it?
Well, we're real asset people though too.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. We're used to.
I guess you're not going to be buying any property on the metaverse then, Karin.
No, I don't understand it. I really don't. And I like to think of myself as someone who's pretty open-minded and I want to understand it, but I don't. I just, no one has been able to convince me.
I realize that it doesn't matter how hard you can keep up with as much as possible, but it moves so fast. And there are people that are maybe coming up and naturally being exposed to it in ways that we have to force ourselves to be exposed. We have to learn about it, where some people, younger people mostly, I'm sure, are so enmeshed in some of these things that it just comes naturally to them. We have to learn,
I think so.
and automatically that creates that gap. and it's a generational gap, whatever you want to call it, but it creates a gap. And then with all the other stuff that we have to think about, I got underwriting to do. I don't have time to think about that. Well, that creates more of a gap, right? And so on and so forth. And I don't know, I don't know. It's interesting. But I do think.
What do you wait? Can I ask Zach? Because it sounded like you knew a little bit more about.
He knows
this
way more than me.
Like, do you what are your thoughts on acquiring, I guess, assets through the metaverse or NFTs?
I don't know about assets on real property on the metaverse. I think there is this kind of land rush going on that I have trouble figuring out if that's really going to pan out. It's kind of like Facebook thinking that they're going to get in on it by changing their name and then all of a sudden their stock plummets because no, you can't just change your name and declare that you're going to be the metaverse. But I kind of think that these NFTs, it's a bubble. People are really overpaying for a lot of these NFTs. And so I think there's this kind of frothy frenzy out there right now just to buy anything that's created and digitized so you can put it on the blockchain and call it an NFT. When you look at a lot of them, they're just like, okay, that's a little graphic art, something figure that somebody created in 5 minutes. Why is that worth 10,000 or 20,000 or 60,000?
The thing that does apply to what we do, and that's what's so confusing, at least to me, is because the focus right now, and maybe it's because of the extraordinary amounts of money that people are paying, but also receiving, is that the underlying technology underneath NFTs can apply to what we do in real estate with certain things, smart contracts and being able to record documents very securely and things, title work and things like that. And
I just finished reading this book called The Bitcoin Standard about Bitcoin. And for many years, people were making that argument that you could use the blockchain technology and apply it to all other industries where you would essentially be able to take out the third-party intermediary. And if you think about it, it really doesn't hold true. It's not a cost-effective solution, and it doesn't make sense that you would be able to, for example, get rid of escrow companies, because the way blockchain technology works is with cryptocurrency is you have hundreds of thousands of computers that are called nodes that are tracking and recording each transaction. And with Bitcoin, for example, the amount of information per transaction is very, very low. So the cost to record that transaction is very, very low, right? There's not a lot of bits to record, I sell my Bitcoin to John. That's a very limited amount of information. So, but when you're talking about something like real estate escrow, you're talking about purchase contracts, potentially mechanics liens, the title can get very convoluted. So it's not something where you could just say, oh, we don't need an escrow officer, and we're going to easily be able to replace that with hundreds of thousands of computers that are going to monitor every transaction and a title record. And then beyond that, the people that are monitoring those transactions in crypto, they're called miners because they're getting compensated by getting Bitcoin, to record those transactions. Well, how are you going to compensate all of these hundreds of thousands of people to record, a title record? So they actually they did a test run with a county. I think it's up in Chicago, one of the counties outside of Chicago, and they tried this out where they tried to have the county record documents, and it was actually a failure. And it wasn't really having to do with the crypto itself and all of that. Although you bring up great points in terms of the problems that can be be put forth. But what they found is getting the gatekeepers, the actual people that worked in the recording offices, getting them to come along with the whole thing. And so you're talking about this incredible industry of gatekeepers that
That's their function to handle all this. And they're completely invested in, you know, even if it's Adobe PDFs and things like that, they're invested in that and they don't want to change. They don't want it, you know, it's just too hard.
Well, and if you're talking about replacing them, I mean, how are you going to replace them? I mean, you can't do
you have
it.
to
You
teach
need
them
a
how
trusted third party like that to record those transactions.
Yeah, you have to teach them how to do it. And like me, they may never catch up, right? You got to train them, you know?
And so for all of these recorders, who is responsible for them?
Right.
I don't understand. That's the part I don't totally understand, is like, ultimately, like, who is responsible for what?
So like in Bitcoin, that's the thing, is that it's a pure, you know, because no one's responsible and because you have all of these nodes verifying the transaction, it's a trustless system that they built out. So no one person or entity is responsible for verifying the transactions. And so if you're talking about getting rid of that third party intermediary, for example, with respect to title, it doesn't make sense. You can't set up that parallel kind of system where who's going to record it, who's going to be responsible for verifying the chain of title,
right?
You know, and how are they going to get compensated?
And what happens to their pension? You know, people go into state jobs, county jobs, typically not for the salary. It's for the stability in the pension, you know, those benefits. And like, okay, you get rid of those, like what, why go into it? You know? But there is a thing that if they can work out the technology, you know, for better or for worse, things like robotics and things like that. I mean, we are hurling ourselves into this sphere.
Well,
and it's not
took a huge jump forward with COVID. There's been a lot of automation in the last few years.
Yeah. You know,
it's really actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say.
I was going to say with so with robotics, I think it's something that in other countries, especially in China, it's been very prevalent for many, many years now, where you'll go to a restaurant and it's a little robot that comes and serves you, right? Like it'll bring your food, and there's still people there. It's just they don't need as many people, right? But I think I hadn't seen that in the US, and whenever I did see it here, it's usually like a video that was kind of like, oh my God, did you see this in China, right? Whereas now, very recently, I went to a restaurant, a hot pot restaurant in Hacienda Heights a few weekends ago, and there was a robot that brought me my food.
Are you kidding me?
I haven't heard of that.
It was kind of neat. It looks like R2D2, except he's got like plates. And then the plates it just comes over and it knows what table you're at. But we ordered with a human. It's just they send the food out with a little robot.
Interesting. Was it efficient or was it just kind of a novelty that it's the place with the robots?
I mean, it was efficient for us as the diner. I don't know for the restaurant how much, you know, I mean, I imagine, yes, if you're saving on footwork of people going back and forth from the table, then it is. You don't have to hire as many people, I guess.
But here's the thing. You got a robot, you got a little R2D2 and that's great. I love it. I mean, we gotta figure all that stuff out. But how many technicians does it take to make one R2D2 versus you know, your busser? Like maybe that doesn't fall on the restaurant. Maybe they got the R2D2 with a maintenance plan, right? And they pay an extra $25 a month to somebody to come out. But you get my point. Like, is it really saving the money or why not?
Well,
I don't know.
I think it depends. Like if a lot of these you know, like labor laws, like if, you know, minimum wage keeps going up and healthcare is required and all of that, like a robot is going to be cheaper eventually, I think, you know?
I saw there was a big thing. I think it was at one of the IMN real estate conferences, and it was really a big discussion about how AI is going to affect residential real estate, and not in the way that we would expect, but how it might affect the renters and their job prospects, right? And high paying jobs, because for a lot of the manufacturing, it was AI, it wasn't robotics. So it was more about, just kind of the shifting winds in terms of even getting more automated on things. And they bring up really good points, right? We're targeting, typically when we're doing our multifamily deals, we're targeting folks who can afford $900 to $1,500 a month, right? And those are higher level, manufacturing jobs, kind of lower level management, some white collar, but not totally, right? And everything in between there. And you could see there may be some industries that could be affected for sure.
Lots of industries.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean that their jobs are going to go away if we keep automating everything? Yeah.
Now people have to live
sure.
somewhere. People have to live somewhere. So we may see more people doubling up just to afford $1,500 a month, tripling up into units. But that's only if that's kind of a worst case scenario. But you're seeing that out here in LA, right?
Yeah.
Where people are stacking up to afford their $5,000 a month 2-bedroom.
Oh yeah, I do. I do see it all the time, especially for people who just graduated from college, where it's like they'll have people like one of the bedrooms is the living room. Yeah.
Well, Karin, your model for a lot of the multifamily that you were building had a lot of bedrooms in the units, right?
And it actually, I think when we started doing that, we were just like, oh, we really want to like target the just out of college, or like open to living with all their friends, right? Like usually once you get married or you pair up, you don't really want to live with your friends. So we were targeting that group. We had a lot of like 4 bedrooms actually, which was kind of not that common in the rental space. And they do well because especially near schools, they do really well because they're basically like student housing. But we also learned during the pandemic, people are really, really craving those. They need rooms to do their Zoom meetings. They need rooms to work from home. Like they need rooms to like get away from their dog while they're trying to work, right? And so it's actually become something that I think is quite in demand right now for people who, are planning on working from home or doing a hybrid work schedule, once the whole shutdown or work from home thing ends. Yeah.
Were you building like bedroom bathroom parity? Like each of your 4 bedrooms had their own
So
bathroom?
like we tried really hard. Like, I mean, we didn't always get, 4 bedroom, 4 baths. But wherever if we had the space, we would try to configure it so there's as many bathrooms as possible. So that,
That's crazy. When we poked around a little bit, like 2 of the things that were really hard to figure out was just the density. Like, and it sounds like you guys figured that out, but how do you build enough units to pay for the $550 a square foot that you're paying to build, and then also the parking? How do you?
The parking is hard. Well, oftentimes we don't end up offering parking to every single person who's living there. A lot of them end up having to find street parking. Parking is really hard.
But there are also like zoning restrictions, right? Like you have to achieve a certain amount of parking unless you get a
unless
variance.
you're within a rapid transit zone.
If you're within it. And I'll be honest, like there have been garages that we have built that like my car does not fit into. Like if you had a really small car, it'll fit in there,
We're getting ready to buy a building and we're gonna have to restripe some of the parking lots and the guy that our parking lot guy, he's going through and he's like, well, you might be able to shave off and if you can get a little skinny on the thing here, and I'm just going, oh my God. Nobody's going to be able to park in here already. They're so thin trying to just squeeze out
they
one
are.
more space.
And I think that's normal for a lot of parts of LA. Like I have a friend who lives in West Hollywood and she has like a beautiful house that's probably worth like, close to $3 million. It's a nice house, but her parking is crazy. Like every time I go there, when I drive through her, because I live in Pasadena where it's like suburbs, right? Like
Right.
parking is everywhere. It's plentiful. But when I go to hers, her driveway is so narrow that I get so scared that I like close my rear view mirrors when I drive down her driveway because I think I'm gonna hit one of the walls.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got your projects like, so what's next for you guys? I mean, you mentioned that you were gonna, possibly look out of state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything
I
else
think
coming up that we should know about?
yeah, I'm looking in some smaller markets, and I think while I want to continue, like I love building and I want to continue to grow and learn with building, I think right now I might be just looking at some, so one of the things I've been talking to my family about a lot is about buying some rental property in the Inland Empire. Like I think there's a lot of great, just like actually really nicely built, good construction workforce housing out in the Inland Empire. And I was like, maybe it's time for us to just like kind of chill with something that's stable with good cash flow right now for a while. As far as more like personal investing of mine, I've been really interested in doing a very curated Airbnb and so it might be something. I mean, it's something that my husband and I always talk about, and I'm like, man, ours would be so good. Like, we totally get that aesthetic. We know where all the parties are. Like, I feel like we'd be amazing hosts, right? And so we've been talking about like maybe getting like an older mid-century house and rehabbing it and just like renting it out during the winter months to like because there's a ton of snowbirds that go there. A lot of Canadians, a lot of people from the Midwest, and they'll just spend 3 months there at a time. So I was like, that'd be a lot of fun. But I think we're more focused on just like stable cash flow stuff right now and less with I just think I need a while before I can like really, like I really want to see where things go this year, right? With like, I know that, next week, I think they're repealing the mask mandate and maybe more and more people will feel better about going back to work. Like, I just want to see where things go before we take like a big risk in something, like especially with building. Yeah.
I think just, overall, even if you're going into the kind of stable cash flow, do some renovations or fluff and fold or whatever you're doing, I think your background in development and construction, all that stuff is really, really valuable. And, if we're talking in terms of scaling, I think that, even if you guys had to partner up to kind of grow really, really big, like your experience where you're at right now would be very valuable to.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask both of you a question, right? Since you're both in, you put together syndicates and okay. So I guess my question is, so in real estate, right? Like for most people, when they decide to put together syndications, right? It's usually because, they're like chasing after a project that is maybe like bigger than what they would want to like invest on their own in, right? Actually, let me ask you this, right? Like if you had the ability to own like your projects by yourself, would you prefer that over putting together a group of investors?
Well, my feeling is having a group of investors enables you to scale up in size into bigger and better quality assets. And so yeah, we have the added burden of having to form a syndication and work with limited partners. But I think the benefit, at least for me, outweighs that. Like, although I bought a 4-unit, I closed on it a month before the COVID lockdowns hit, and I built 2 ADUs, and I just now tenanted up the last of those 2 new units, and it took probably a year longer to do all that than it should have, but I've done that. And, I think my upside in that is, I don't know, it's close. If I had taken the same amount of money and put it in a larger building, maybe, but the experience and owning the syndication buildings that Mark and I own, I think they're they're higher caliber buildings. And so,
Mhm.
moving forward, I think, at least for me, having had both of those experiences, I would tend towards larger, higher quality assets.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to kind of tack on to what Zach was saying, me getting such a late start in life in all of this,
Mhm.
doing the monopoly way would take forever, and in my opinion, especially in this market where really good deals are few and far between.
Mhm.
So a duplex here, a duplex there, a triplex, trade one in, try to get a 6,
Mhm.
try to get an 8. It takes a long time. And
Yeah.
I feel like, I learned pretty early on somehow that there's so much work to do in what we do. And having partners, really good partners that you trust,
Mhm.
really can kind of exponentially grow all that. Yes, you have to give away
Yeah.
some of it, but there's also the um there's something to like not having the hubris that you can do it all. There's something to
Mm.
being able to be like, you know what? My partner's better than me at certain things, and that's okay. I'm learning
Yeah.
from him, and I think that there's some things that I contribute to the relationship, and by that we actually make each other better. And with our limited partners and other strategic partners that we work with, I don't see a path personally. I don't see, without raising capital, I really don't see a very quick exponential path to go from, the duplexes or even a small retail
Mhm.
strip center to the class A properties that we're looking at
Yeah.
purchasing now within
Yeah.
within a short period of time. I just don't,
Yeah.
without having the knowledge of finance and how to structure these deals and also how to manage and have a really strong investor relations portion of it as
Yeah.
well. Like, I don't see how we would get there. Some people have.
Yeah.
I just don't see how we would.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just curious about it because I recently met this woman who, well, I'm good friends with her daughter. So I met this woman who came to the United States like in the 1980s, didn't speak any English. She worked as like a secretary for a small realty company here in the San Gabriel Valley, and she decided to get her realtor's license. Never brokered anything in her life for anyone else, but so back in like 1985 or something, she bought a single family house in Moreno Valley. And I'm sure it cost her nothing at the time, right? And she managed it herself because she was not a sophisticated real estate investor at all, right? Managed it herself and just over the years bought a whole bunch of these kind of like small, inexpensive properties. And then at one point, I think she started just refining and rolling them up into like properties in Inglewood. Then she took that and started buying up some like really crap. This is like before the arts district was even called the arts district, right? But she bought some like really, really crappy warehouses in that area when
Hmm.
it was a dangerous area. But anyway, I was just chatting with her recently and I was like, oh, so you've done most of this like yourself. You haven't had investors or partners or anything. And she's like, no, I don't trust anyone. I feel like I can just do this all myself and I don't have to like get the agreement of other people, and it just made it a lot easier, right? And I was like, oh, that's so interesting because that's like not been my experience with like where I've gotten to so far, right? And I was like chatting with my father about it too. And I was like, like for most of, the properties that we've acquired, during his lifetime, it's also through syndications, right? And I asked him, I was like, do you think that it would have been a lot easier had you just like started with like small, like crappier, not crappier, but like, smaller properties that require heavier management and just, kind of acquired these yourself and not had to go through the headaches of like dealing with like a lot of attorneys and all these like, investors and all this stuff, right? And he was like, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's like I didn't go that path. So it's like hard for me to say. But it's one of those things that, having heard my friend's mom's story, I was like, oh, I wonder if that made things easier for her or not. I know she owns probably, and this is all by herself. She's a single mom. We were just talking about everything that she owns, and just roughly was like guessing she probably owns $40 million in real estate at this point, which I was like, wow, not shabby at all. Starting from like a single family house in Moreno Valley. Yeah.
It's listen, like I said, I think that I have heard stories of people doing it themselves. So no knock on that at all.
Yeah.
Eventually, the Sam Zells of the world, they end up realizing, and you probably find out that there are partners that they work with that maybe aren't as in front when you get that size, right?
Yeah.
And in order to get that size, you just can't. It's like the Warren Buffett thing, right? If people only concentrated on him, they wouldn't realize that Charlie Munger was there all along too. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I don't know. It's I'm like your dad, like I do know this. The couple times that I did landlord myself, and I don't know how Zach does this, but the couple times that I landlord myself, I was horrible.
I was just going to say, that's one of the best things about syndicating and being able to hire best in class third party.
Exactly.
You don't have to take that phone.
You don't have to do it. Exactly.
I was not a best in class property manager at all.
It's hard. It's a completely different set of skills. It's very hard. Yeah.
But I'm a bleeding heart liberal too. So like I would give, I was giving people chances all over the place, and I just like sucked in the eye and beat up and all kinds of
no, it is not an easy job dealing with tenants. I don't know if I have the stomach for it.
But but it's all good. It's all a learning experience too. And if she's able to do it, I think it sounds to me that she knew how to 1031, if I would like venture a guess. And also, even if they were kind of crappy, she really perhaps had an eye for certain areas. The thing about investing in the Southern California is there are some crappy areas, but it's Southern California. It's a 24-hour gateway city with three of the global ports in the world. Well, sorry, two of the global ports, and 10, 15, 20 million people. You know what I mean? Like
someone's gonna want it.
You can put a pin somewhere and do something, right? And so there's a lot of luck involved with that. You guys were in Westchester. How did you guys know that SoFi Stadium was going to go up and things were just going to exponentially grow in a lot of ways?
Yeah.
Well, plus she bought in 85, right? So Southern California is one of those markets that really appreciates in value. So she was able to ride that appreciation wave too.
Yeah. But the 1031, I'm sure, helped her. And the discipline to take, when you sell something, to not be like, okay, I'm going to go out and buy a Ferrari and things like that, but to take your money and reinvest it and have that discipline is so critical.
It is. Yeah, for sure.
So,
Anyway, well, this has been great, Karin. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been really fun chatting with both. Wait, can I ask you one more question? Sure. How did you guys meet each other?
We met at a real estate investors conference. It was a multifamily real estate investors conference out in Boston.
Yep.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And I think it was we actually met during one of those like,
it was the speed networking.
That's what right? You have like 2 seconds or 10 seconds to meet somebody, shake their hand, and hand over a business card. And so
it's interesting because, well, I was just going to say, Zach was doing some deals, and I have a lending business. And so, he would throw deals at me just to check out and see if we might be able to find debt and stuff like that before we ever kind of started working together. And then I think you said, hey, let's do some commercial. I think it was what it was.
Yeah.
And so our first deal that we did was commercial property. which is interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Wait, and were you both from LA when you met in Boston?
Yeah, I think that was the
Oh,
interesting
okay.
thing too.
I
Yeah, from the
see.
valley.
Okay.
Both
We
from
both lived in the valley, so that
Yeah.
was kind of the connection. And that made it
I
easy
see.
to get
Totally.
together afterward.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, how funny. Okay. That's great. Yeah.
So if people are interested in learning a little bit more about you and Infinity Realty Advisors, how can they get in touch?
So, I mean, they can get in touch with, they can go on my website, right? So it's advisorsinfinity.com, right? And, I'm not like a huge social media person. So I do have an Instagram and I kind of just talk about all kinds of things on it, from like cooking to my dogs, to architecture, to like different deals I'm looking at. So it's like not totally professional. But if you're looking for me, I'm Chairman Chao on Instagram.
I love that.
Oh yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, and it's private. So if you ask for me to be your friend, I'll accept. Yeah.
That's great.
Super.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you again, Karin. Really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, this has been fantastic chatting with you on all these different subjects, and really getting your take on different things has been very cool.
Yeah,
Thank
same
you.
here. Same here. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to listen to the rest of the series. Yeah.
Thank you.
10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winner and Markadair Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you, and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.